on the surface, but if you actually stop and think about it, that's not really how visual novels work at all. Visual novel characters aren't AI-based. Their behavior is determined entirely by what's written in the game's script. The game's dialogue script, not programming script. I can see how that gets confusing. There's simply no need for a character in a dating sim to have complicated behaviors like this. But what if they were created for a more complex game? What if the characters in Doki Doki Literature Club were intended to be used in a different game altogether? One where they would need to have more complex, believable responses to a greater range of player choice? What if their assets were simply repurposed from that game in order to make this dating sim? It's not just speculation. The clues are there, hidden in plain sight in Doki Doki's central mechanic, the poems. Over the course of the first act, you read poems from all the other club members, which seems pretty innocent. Sure, reading between the lines, you can start to get hints that Sayori is depressed, that Yuri is prone to self-harm, and that Natsuki is being abused by her father, but it's nothing overt. In the game's second act, you're given 3 randomly selected special poems out of a possible 11 that makes these hints much more overt. But there's one of these poems in particular that really stands out. A huge block of redacted text with only a few letters left visible, spelling out the question, "Nothing is real." That would be unsettling enough on its own, but if there's one thing Scott Cawthon has trained me to do, it's to run dark images through Photoshop and play around with sliders. If you crank up the exposure on that image all the way to max capacity, suddenly it becomes possible to read the full text, and man, it is weird. Irregular heartbeat, heart palpitations, arrhythmia. I search and search, eyes scanning everything I can find on their symptoms. What is this? Shortness of breath? Chest pain? Dizziness? No, this is all wrong. Alyssa's symptoms are nowhere near this simple. I've seen it twice now. The screams of pain, sickeningly pale skin, vomiting blood. There is no other explanation other than that Renier's information was a complete and utter lie. This can't all be coincidence. It's not possible. I don't know how much of this Renier is behind, but I do know this. There is something horribly wrong with this family, and I accepted the invitation to become a part of it. I can hear Alyssa's screams through the walls now. I listen helplessly. Renier said he would be with her shortly. Is he in her room now? Why is she screaming even louder than before? Chilling, right? This creepy letter is literally hidden right in front of your face while you play this game. And what's it all mean? Well, those opening lines make it sound like someone who's trying to identify an illness. Irregular heartbeat, heart palpitations, arrhythmia are all possible problems of the heart, so it's not so much this person is making a diagnosis, but rather it's someone trying to read the symptoms he's seeing and figure out what the diagnosis is. It's a clinical assessment, which means that the speaker is a doctor of some kind. And notice the words he uses, their symptoms. It's an illness affecting multiple people, a family, as we see later in the letter. A family that apparently you can join, almost like a cult. It's also worth noting that this doctor who's speaking has some degree of detachment from this girl Alyssa, almost like she's a research subject of some kind, possibly part of a human experiment. And when you put all this together, a cult performing experiments on young girls, it starts sounding familiar. We hear about human experiments exactly 2 times in Doki Doki Literature Club, both times when Yuri describes the plot of The Portrait of Markov, the book that she wants to read with us. A book which has a, quote, ominous-looking eye symbol on the front cover. In the first act, Yuri makes it sound relatively innocent enough. Quote, basically it's about this girl in high school who moves in with her long-lost younger sister, but as soon as she does so, her life gets really strange. She gets targeted by these people who escaped from a human experiment prison, and while her life is in danger, she needs to desperately choose who to trust. End quote. In the second act, Yuri's personality gets a bit more unhinged, and she gives us a creepier description of what's actually going on these pages. Quote again, basically it's about this religious camp that's turned into a human experiment prison. All the people trapped there have this trait that turns them into killing machines that lust for blood. But the facility gets even worse, and they start selectively breeding people by cutting off their limbs and affixing them to, and then she cuts off. That's a lot of information for a fake book, especially when you compare it to what we learn about Natsuki's favorite manga. And that's because what Yuri tells us about the portrait of Markov isn't just a short snippet of text meant to create the illusion of a bigger story, it is the bigger story here. It's the plot of the horror game that Team Salvato is working on. The game that all 4 of these characters originate from. And if you think I'm done, oh no, we have just scratched the surface. We can dig deeper to uncover more about this horror game, including its title and release date, as well as how these 4 girls fit into the overall story, because Team Salvato left a whole ARG's worth of content hidden in Doki Doki's game files. If you thought that the Literature Club was interesting before, simply because it had these cool meta moments and jump scares, well, get ready. There's a whole other game here, just resting underneath the surface, waiting to be puzzled together, that'll start to make you really question everything you thought you knew about Sayori, Natsuki, Monika, and especially Yuri. But it's all way too much to cover in this one video, so ring the bell to subscribe, help us get closer to the glorified paperweight, so that way you can know when later this week, yeah, should be just a couple days, when part 2 comes out and things start to get really crazy. I am already excited for this new game, and I think once you see what I and a bunch of Reddit community members have uncovered about it, you're gonna be really excited too. And in the meantime, remember, that's just a Monika. A Monika. Just Monika.